Well, having received a number of complaints from scrutineers,
Mm-hmm.
I, with some help from our good mate Ben
Mm-hmm.
Tilbury
Yep.
in the West,
Yep.
who was standing for the seat of Fremantle,
Mm-hmm.
he pointed me to the Electoral Commission handbook on how to screw up an election. And essentially brought my attention to section 274, subsection 2, capital A of the Commonwealth Electoral Act.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the elephant in the room.
Radio.
And it's been there for quite some time now, but enough to sway the election in the polling booth.
Yep.
Essentially. Okay. So what does that section say? It says if in a House of Representatives election,
Mm-hmm.
there are more than two candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I should say there are more than two candidates
Mm-hmm.
for a division. The Australian Electoral Officer for the state or territory that includes the division must, in writing, direct each assistant returning officer for the division
Mm-hmm.
and the divisional returning officer for the division to conduct a count of preference votes other than first preference,
Mm-hmm.
okay, on the ballot papers that, in the opinion of the Australian Electoral Officer, will best provide an indication of the candidate most likely
Mm-hmm.
to be elected for the division.
Yep.
So first of all, it's got to be in writing.
Yep.
Well, in each case, it was a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
So the Australian Electoral Officer
Mm-hmm.
rang each booth
Mm-hmm.
and said, you are to count the primary votes.
Yep.
And then ignore the preferential system
Mm-hmm.
and bring on the two-party preferred, which is the grant of power under Section 274 2A,
Mm-hmm.
which didn't appear until 1992.
Mm.
Right now, this flies directly in the face of the voter and their intention.
Mm.
So essentially, this section of law allows the Australian Electoral Officer, with his opinion, his
Mm-hmm.
or her opinion, to override the preferential system of voting in the polling booth.
Yes.
So that means once it goes, it's initially counted,
Yep.
so that they can do all the hoo-ha on media.
Yes, correct.
It's all media based.
Yep.
So we just ignore the lies that they just thrive on,
Mm-hmm.
and we focus on essentially then the corrupted vote that's handed to the media.
Mm.
So they then essentially look at the ballot paper, and if the primary votes, if the two parties or three parties or however many have the bulk of the votes, once that primary vote's established, then they look at every other vote.
Mm.
And if those parties appear in the other votes,
Yep.
then they're added
On, yeah.
to the primary vote to satisfy the media
Yeah.
hoo-ha. Okay.
So we want to make it clear, because a couple of people said, "Oh, you guys did a video the other night, and you didn't differentiate between the first counting for the media and the second counting, which is the true counting." And so we're talking only now about this first counting, which is for the media counting.
Yeah.
But again, even at that point, there are still strict guidelines that have to be met that were not met, and one of those is that direction has to come from the AEC officer in writing, not via a phone call. This is what we're raising. So when we get into arguments about, but that was just the media count and the real count happens later on. Yes, we understand that. We're getting to that. What we're saying is that even at the first point, which is the media count, that there was a process to be followed, and that was not followed correctly.
And in one particular case, and it's been confirmed in others, but I'll just focus on one scrutineer's report.
Yep.
Essentially, the bulk of the rest of the votes were where it was clear that the majors were put last. So essentially they were then able to take, and this defeats the preference system,
of course,
because they were able to take a vote where the majors were 9 and 10, for instance, and put it into the primary vote. So that's a corrupted number. First and foremost, okay. They shouldn't be allowed to do that, because in the preferential system, the 9 and 10 vote would be soaked up by the lower numbers, by the lower, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th preferences. So once they've corrupted that vote that's gone to the divisional centre, then it's invalid, under their own system, which is prescribed in the Commonwealth Electoral Act. So this one subsection stands out like a sore thumb to the rest of the legislation. Okay, and this is crucial, that we understand how these votes are essentially done on polling day. Okay, and this is very important, because once we understand what orders came from the electoral officer to each polling booth, then we better understand the corruption. Now, a lot of the people that were counting in these booths have been doing this job in the past, of course, and they were automatically laying out their votes according to the preferential system. And we had supervisors who, under instruction from the Australian electoral officers by phone, were then coming up, gathering up all those votes and saying, no, you can't use that system here. Okay? You can't use that. And now we've got to, what's the point of the preferential system if they're going to abuse it? They have learned from the past that preferential system can in fact topple, especially in a period where the main parties are weak. They've been weakened by the last 2-year events.
Absolutely. And
they're desperate, so they need to rely on a section of law that they put in place in 1992, which authorises them to bring about what we know as two-party preferred. And that's what the two-party preferred system actually means. It doesn't say two-party preferred essentially in the legislation. The key word is the word opinion. It's in the opinion. So how the hell could the opinion of one officer or a number of electoral officers override the intention of the voter? And this is what's taken place. We've been robbed of our vote, essentially based on this one section of law. When Australia can get their heads around that, we can then move forward, and we intend...
So what's going to happen when all the votes are truly counted over the next 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, how can we say that vote is true? Is that vote a result of the polling at the polling centre? And have they then taken that corrupt? Is it a corrupted vote? What I'm saying, and what we're not sure on, okay, is that vote that's appeared at the divisional centres is the vote that's come from the polling booth, which has been corrupted by Section 2A of Section 274. So they've gone, oh, wow, look, we've got a 9 and 10 for Liberal and Labor. We'll now take them and transfer them to the primary vote.
Yes. No, I know what you're saying, but what I'm saying is a couple of weeks down the track, when all these votes are laid out, won't they then redo those vote counts and say, oh, well, no, actually this person did vote them 9 and 10, so they're right down the bottom of the list, and there's 1, 2, 3 or 4 beforehand.
Well, then we would have to be assured that the the vote, the primary vote, unpolluted by the two-party preferred, that then follows the process under the preferential system. Then, yes, we've got a legitimate vote. And then we can comfortably look around and say, yeah, that's why. Because you go to any shopping centre and most people wearing the masks are the ones that are voting Liberal and Labor.
Absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, again, I've spoken to a number of people, obviously, about this since Saturday, and your initial reaction is, oh God, now we've got Labor in, and they've proven time and time again to be the worst throughout history, and all the rest of it. So that's definitely a major downside. But as with anything, I mean, this is my success coaching stuff coming through, I guess, and a lesson I was taught long ago is no matter how thin you slice it, there's always two sides. And so there's always a positive, and certainly for me, one of the positive takeaways was that both the major parties lost 30% of the vote. I mean, that's huge in one election for both Labor and Liberal to lose 30% of their voters. Now, that's massive. That is a huge indication that a lot of people are fed up with the major parties.
One third of the electors have turned.
Now, I think the challenge may be that so many people over the last 2 years, clearly not enough, but so many people over the last 2 years have woken up, realised that COVID's a scam, and that the two-party preferred system is a scam, and all the other things that they've learnt from our videos and radio shows and books and CDs and all the rest of it, and they've woken up. But see, it's human nature that when you understand something, you just automatically think that everybody else understands it at the same time. Just because you've cottoned onto it, you sort of figure, well, everyone else must have cottoned onto it too. But of course, that's not actually what happens in reality, as a lot of us are finding out when we're trying to spread the word and get others to wake up. But I think there was this kind of feeling, because so many people, specifically over the last 2 years, had woken up to the truth. They figured, well, look, we're all going to band together. I mean, there was all these rallies, and we had 50, 100, even up to 200,000 people attend some of these rallies, and people said, yes, this is the time that we're going to make a change. This is the election that we're going to change everything. But you've got to understand, again, there are 25 million people in this country. Even if you had 200,000, 400,000, 500,000 people, even if you had 1 million people around the whole country turning up to these rallies, and all of these million people all voted independents, there's still 24 million people who are still completely brainwashed that are still voting for the majors. And this is the issue. People genuinely thought this year, no, this is the time we're going to change the whole system. We're going to bring down this two-party preferred duopoly that's been operating for 100 years now, and we're going to do it in one election. It doesn't work that way. And again, this is one of the challenges. People can only see 2 steps ahead of them. People can only make a plan for next week and next month at the most. But the elite, the people who are pulling these puppet strings, they're making plans 10, 20, 50, 100 years in advance. So we, the people, those of us who have woken up, we're trying to see an election that's going to happen in a month and say, right, we've all got to band together and we've got to bring down this system that's been operating for 100 years. And you can't do it. It's not physically possible. But the good news is that if in one election we can make the majors lose 30% of their vote each, and then in another 3 years, at the next election, we can force the majors to lose another 30% of their vote. And then in another 3 years after that, which is only 6 years away, we can make them lose another 30%. Then we are in a position of power. Okay, so this is what people need to look at. They need to look at the longer term picture. You can't just snap your fingers and expect things to change overnight. It doesn't work that way. This system of brainwashing, this system of slowly but surely eroding our rights has been going on for such a long time. Okay, if you've been eating and drinking too much for 2 years over COVID and you've put on 5 or 10 kilos, you can't just snap your fingers and say, all right, I'm going to go hard, I'm going to eat well, and no, don't drink anything, I'm going to hit the gym for 2 weeks and I'm going to lose it. It doesn't work that way. You put it on over 2 years. Now, it might not take you 2 years to lose it, but it's going to take you a significant amount of time, maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months. Okay? So it's the same thing. This duopoly's been going for 100 years. You've got to understand, it's going to take a few years of concerted effort, people working together collectively to bring that system undone. But the first step has now occurred, and we've achieved a really positive result given how much the major parties lost at this election. So I think people really should stay focused on that and be positive with that side of the outcome and continue working together collectively. Again, the other challenge that we've got is we've got the two major parties. You've got the Greens in there as well, but how many independents were there? How many different freedom parties were there? These people all need to unite and get together and form some sort of a coalition. Then we become a force to be reckoned with. But when you've got 27 different other parties that or independents that all have different goals, ideas, and most importantly egos, it makes it very, very challenging. Because even if half the people, okay, think about this, if even just half the people, half of the entire population of the country said, right, I've had enough of the majors, I'm going to vote independence. And the other half of the country said, no, I'm going to vote with the majors. So you've got 12.5 million people casting their votes across two parties. The other 12.5 million people are casting their vote across 27 parties or independents, or whatever number you want to pick. But you get my point. It's all spread too thin, and this is why the major parties keep getting away with what they've got away with so far. So we, the independents, the freedom parties, whatever you want to call it, need to start banding together and start working together collectively. This is how we're going to make a difference. And hopefully everybody from all the different independents, hopefully all the different people from all the different parties are listening to this and taking on board this message. Not a criticism, not having a go at anyone. I'm just, I look at problems and I search for solutions and I find ways to get results. That's what I do as a success coach. And this to me seems pretty clear and pretty obvious.